the chapter we will begin with is Chapter 1, and it's the Introduction to Dental Materials. Upon completion of this course, we will have discussed the importance of the study of dental materials for the allied oral health practitioner. We will discuss why it is necessary that the allied oral health practitioner have an understanding of dental materials and the delivery of dental care. Discuss the evidence-based decision-making as it relates to these materials and what questions we might ask ourselves when we're trying to ensure that we're increasing the potential for successful patient care outcomes. We will review the historical development of dental materials and list and compare the agencies that are responsible for setting our standards and specifications for those dental materials. And we will discuss the requirements necessary for a consumer product to qualify for the ADA seal of acceptance. So the study and science of the evolution, development, and properties, manipulation, care, and evaluation of materials used in treatment and prevention of dental disease, and the interactions of these materials is what we are talking about. We need to make sure that our materials are safe and compatible with the tissues of the head and neck and oral cavity. This is specifically going to include the principles of the engineering, chemistry, physics, and biology of those materials. What is our role in the use of dental materials? We need to make sure that we're aware of state laws and that we're following the state laws and only applying and utilizing materials that are deemed legal for us. We also need to understand the different classifications of those dental materials. We have some that are preventative, restorative, and therapeutic. Those are the three main categories or classifications of materials that we will be working with. Why do we as dental hygienists need to study dental materials? We need to understand their properties and the effects that these materials can have on our patients. So we need to know how to use them safely. We need to know how to maintain those for our patients. We definitely need to know how to deliver the materials that we're using. And then it is our job as a hygienist to educate our patients on how to care for those materials in their mouth. Evidence-based dentistry is so important. This is an approach to oral health care that requires the judicious integration of systematic assessments of clinically relevant scientific evidence relating to that patient's oral medical history. We also rely on our dentist's clinical expertise, as well as the patient's treatment needs and their preferences. So evidence doesn't always replace clinical expertise or a patient's opinion, but we definitely want to be using materials that have been backed by science and have been proven by studies of larger groups, not just on one person, to make sure that it is safe and effective. Some of the elements of that evidence-based dentistry, as we were talking about, is that scientific evidence, meaning that there have been, like I said, studies done on a broad sample of people, and it has been proven to be true. Then we've got the clinician's experience and expertise. So that would come from either you and your experience of using a material, or the dentist using the materials as well. And then we always have to consider our patient's needs, conditions, and preferences. Some patients want something that's less expensive but will stand the test of time. And then others are more concerned with aesthetics and they want it to look nice. So those are all things that we want to take into consideration. So the historical development of dental materials. There's been no evidence of restorative dentistry before 600 to 300 BC. This is when we first have anything noted about any restorative work, and it's pretty amazing that we have been able to track it that far back. In the mid-18th century, so the 1700s, casts of teeth were actually constructed. Those were noted. some of the early dentures, the spring closed denture is kind of interesting. This is what was often thought to be worn by George Washington. I can't imagine that these would be super comfortable, but this was our first attempt at dentures. And then the one on the right is a denture that was carved out of black and white ivory. So we've come a long way from then. In 659 CE, this was when the Chinese used a silver paste. This was first mentioned back then. And silver paste was produced in the 1800s in France. 1907, casting method was used to produce some gold inlays. Fluoride was first mentioned in 1874. In 1895, this is just kind of a timeline as things were developing. In 1895, G.V. Black, who is the author of the different classes of fillings, he developed the first viable amalgam formula. And then in 1901, Frederick Mackay noted, he was credited with finding out why we were seeing the dental fluorosis in Colorado. He found that there were high levels of naturally occurring fluoride in the water in Colorado and connected this to the high number of people we were seeing with fluorosis. This is what fluorosis looks like. You guys will experience a lot of this in our clinic. Many of our patients are natives of Mexico, and it seems down in the southern Texas, Mexico, there is naturally occurring fluoride in their water system that is high. And so we see some pretty severe cases of fluorosis in our clinic. Some of the agencies that are responsible for setting standards on dental materials, products, and equipment, we'll start with the ADA. The ADA is in charge of giving our consumer products testing and giving them approval. So this started in 1930. The ADA established these guidelines for the testing of consumer products, not our products, but the ones that the patients will go and buy over the counter. That's why when I'm working with my patients and I'm making recommendations, I always encourage them to look for this ADA accepted symbol on the product, because that means it's been tested for safety. I never recommend any of the products that aren't approved. That's not to say those products aren't fine products, but I don't want to recommend those because those aren't science evidence-based approved products, and that's all I want to recommend. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration, they set standards and approval for our medical devices, and they group these as needed in their safety and efficacy classes. So a class 1 device would fall under the lowest risk, and a class 3 would be the most heavily regulated. There are some international agencies as well that are mentioned in your book, the FDI World Dental Federation and the International Organization for Standardization, or the ISO. Both of these agencies are that are listed represent the standards used to develop specifications and testing on an international level. So dental materials, as we know, they continue to evolve as a science, and I'm glad that they do. They only become better. For our dental hygienists, that's challenging because they're harder to identify, but they look nice. The aesthetics are incredible, and they are becoming very biocompatible so that patients' oral tissues respond well to them. They've become easier to manipulate. They continue to improve that as well. And the current research is focused on bringing this technology, new technology, constantly into the dental office. So this is why it's so important for us to be educated on these materials and to continue getting educated through our continuing education courses that are offered yearly, so that we can keep abreast of the latest and greatest techniques and materials.